Welcome, everyone, for another episode of the Three Amigos. Today, Ron's going to talk a little bit about how, with the great resignation going on, how you can find and keep good candidates. COVID has had an enormous impact, and so have a lot of other things that have all come together to make this a real employees market. So with that, Ron, why don't you go ahead and give us some insights on what you've learned?
Sure. Thank you, Ray. And welcome all. We're in unprecedented times, which we're going to talk a little bit more as a group. But we pulled together a little bit of information, and of course, all three of us are in touch with clients and our micro giants entrepreneurs. And so we're out there talking to people all of the time about how difficult it is to hire. And this is perhaps the most difficult hiring circumstance that any of us have seen in our long lifetimes. So because we've been in the business of hiring and firing for many years, we thought it would be appropriate for us to make some comments about this. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So our topic then is finding employee candidates, and of course, today it's myself and Ed Lasik and Ray Anderson, as usual, for the Three Consulting Amigos. Right now, there are 11 million open jobs.
Wow.
Now that is hard to imagine. We just went over this threshold. This number has broken records for 3 months in a row. Don't know if it'll go to 12 million next month or what, but it's absolutely incredible to see so many jobs that are unfilled. And it is the highest number in history. And there are only 8.6 million people who want a job. Now that's a little bit older statistic in August, but it's probably not more than 9. So there are a couple million, maybe 3 jobs that may never be filled. The participation rate is the lowest percentage of workers in a half century. And so, Ray, you had just said that our unemployment rate, I think it's 4.2 now, is among the lowest, if not the lowest, in, I don't know, 40 years or so. It's very low. We were very close to this during the Trump years. So we're kind of back to where the full employment was with Trump. Normally, 4% is what economists say is full employment because of the natural change of people from one job to another job. And people are quitting in record numbers as well. So everybody who's in the workforce may be looking for a better job and taking their time. But I think the issue here is that we're not going to fill 11 million jobs anytime soon. I don't know if ever. So what we have then is, here's a chart of the unemployment rate, and way over here you can see, excuse me, this is not the unemployment rate, this is the participation rate. And the participation rate normally is up, 67%, certainly between 65, and 67%. But it dropped all the way down to under 60% during COVID, which you might expect. But look at this, it's only come back up to about 61.5%. That is among the lowest number of working people. That's a percentage of those who are working in the economy all the way back to 1975. This is a long time. So we've got fewer people working to support the rest of us, 60% supporting the other 40% of us. And in addition to that, what that really means, all those total numbers, is that that's about 3 million jobs that if everybody was working and the rate dropped to 0, these jobs would never be filled. So now the question is, as a small business person, what are you going to do about it? And is one of those 3 million jobs, what are the ones that you need to hire? So this is a very tough circumstance. So now what we have is a situation where really employers have to rethink where they're at, because it's the worker, the employee, who's in the catbird seat today, and they've got all the power. So, what do we do about all of this stuff? Let's first talk about why people are not working. Of course, I think probably number one is the idea that there's a fear of COVID. There's a big range, we could talk a long time about this. There's a big range of people who, of attitudes that people have about COVID. And it ranges everything from my sister, who is afraid to go out and do anything and must mask up, and so forth. And we've all seen these people who have 2 or even 3 masks on, who won't go anywhere, do anything. To the other side, the anti-vaxxers, who are almost belligerent about that fact, and will go out and do everything all the time with everybody if they could. So what a diversity of opinions about this, and what an interesting split in attitudes, which is basically based on personality, I believe. We could talk more about that in a future time or later on if you guys would like to. Extra government payments. I don't think the government wants to admit that this is the case. However, plain, straightforward economics says that when you get free money, you either spend it or you don't go back to work. And so one or the other is happening. It's pretty clear to me that these government payments have really kept people out of the workplace. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think there's certainly some truth to that. I think one of the issues that is really prevalent today, particularly among single moms, and I've had a heart for those for a long time, is that getting daycare at this point is prohibitively expensive. When a person is working, a woman is working at a minimum wage job, her daycare, if she's got 2 kids, will be more than she's making. So they're staying home, and we've got about 2.9 million women workers who are not coming back to the workforce. And that's something of a challenge.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I've got childcare on the list as well, and that is a big problem. And it's a dual problem. Not only do women, if they have a chance, many times, and I've got many friends and associates who've decided to stay home after they had a chance, working with their kids, and or not working, or at least working at home and spending more time with their children. They're relieving the cost of childcare. But then on the other side of it, childcare prices have just gone berserk in the last 4, 5, 6 years. In California, they tried to unionize every child worker. They tried to have special education, turn it into sort of a teaching position as opposed to keeping their noses wiped.
Mm.
And which most of us don't want just a nose wiper to take care of our kids. However, there were a lot more alternatives. It used to be that you could start a daycare with 3 or 4 or 5 of your neighbor's friends, and you could make a little bit of money, and you would save a lot of money for in terms of costs for your neighbors. That doesn't happen, at least in California, anymore. Currently, the new bill that Biden is talking about will make this even harder, and the cost will soar up to maybe you're right, Ray. Perhaps your entire salary, even if you're making a good job, have a good job, it'll really take a large piece of number, unless then the government decides to pay for it, and that is billions of dollars. So it doesn't look like that's going to get through right now. But yeah, that's right. I think also a few others here, they feel like they can get a better job. That is certainly true based on the statistics. There are a lot of people who took early retirement, people our age who've worked 30, 40, 50 years, and some of them who've only worked 20, 25 years, who happen to be in the police department or work for government. They hit 55 and they look at the circumstance, and they've got full benefits, and they just figure, why not retire? So we have a combination of people who are at the end of their work life who maybe, really are not able or want to work, and deserve to retire perhaps, but you also have a large contingent of people who have these really fabulous retirement opportunities at just 55. And those people are going, if I'm concerned about COVID, I'm just going to retire. Just met some neighbors. Both he and her are retired from police departments and live up in my neighborhood, and they're doing just quite well on this early retirement deal. We talked about childcare operations or obligations. Shifting career opportunities. There are a lot of people who are kind of looking at the opportunities and saying, well, I always wanted to do this, or I always wanted to do that. And what a nice time and opportunity to do it. It's a perfect time to do that. You have better working conditions. They want better working conditions. Many people who either commute and would like to not commute as much. Certainly we in Southern California are kind of in that situation. And they've had an opportunity to work at home, but they also may not really be working in the best of conditions. They would like to be able to have maybe a little bit more space, a little nicer office, etc. And so they're and of course you also have perhaps factory workers who would like to have more flexibility, or they want to work different hours. So there are an awful lot of opportunities there in white and blue collar positions where they would just simply, they're looking for better working conditions, and now they can. And then finally, work at home. A new study shows, several studies have shown that now the majority, just over 50% of workers actually would prefer to spend 3 days a week at home. And boy, has that changed. And I think COVID has done that for, perhaps the fear of COVID is one thing, but they're finding that it's pretty nice not to commute. They can set up their office at their home the way they want. They have flexible time. So wow, that's a major social cultural shift that I don't know if that'll go back to normal or not. And then finally, and we talked a little bit about this, in order to be able to do this, now that the government payments have come to an end or are ending soon, and unemployment is dropping. But we have this situation where we have an unprecedented, this is more of an opinion than a fact, although it's not my own opinion, but we have so much wealth in this country that we have the ability, many of us have the ability to actually wait. We can take a month, we can take 2 months, either just to have fun, take a vacation with your family, do something different for a few months, kind of change of scenery, or just simply spend that time looking for the ideal job. It says a lot about a country where you have so many people who can literally have enough wealth to wait. And I'm not talking about rich, just enough not to starve to death and not work. That's unprecedented as well. Of course,
I think one of the things I was going to make an observation, that this is not only here in the United States, but we've all heard of the Chinese expression "lie flat," and in part, in China and Japan and some of these other Asian countries, I mean, it's not uncommon to work 100 hours a week. And a lot of the younger people are saying, "Hey, I'm not willing to do that anymore." And I think we're seeing some of that here in the United States. I think one of the other things that you've kind of hit on here, Ron, that I think is a major issue. We've had this emphasis in education here in the United States that you need to get a college degree, and it's estimated by the end of the decade we'll have 3 million jobs for baby boomers who have left technical work, and there's nobody to fill them. And so, you were talking about these training conditions, and the point is that people don't even realize they have these opportunities to make, $25, $30, and $40 an hour on these jobs. But they've been kind of told they're above that, so to speak. And it's really kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, that's a major point, Ray, and it crossed my mind to include it on the list. I don't know why I didn't get it on there, but it's a very big deal.
Mhm.
I mean, it was what a year ago, 2 years ago, when everybody was talking about the skills gap.
Mhm.
That was number one in in all the literature. Well, the skills gap hasn't gone away. You're
You're
quite
right.
right. Yeah, it's still there.
Yeah.
And if we kind of recall back to those headlines in some of the articles that were being written a year or 2 years ago, the skills gap might beat those 3 million jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're quite right. There is a real problem with getting the right people to match, and of course, the unemployment rate. Many times, people have described that as being those people who are mismatched for their jobs.
Hmm.
That they just don't quite have the right skills. People want to move up, but they want to move into an area where there are too many people. We got too many people in marketing. That's a
Right.
field I've been very involved in. Uh, it doesn't take much to be in marketing, except maybe a smiling face and a little bit of common sense. Not that there aren't a lot of secrets and things that could be done better, but that there's very little sophistication of employers hiring marketing people. They don't know who to hire or why or how to hire. That's a totally different thing than machinists. You can't go out and smile nice and do a little
Yeah.
bit of work on a machine and get by. You better be milling that machine down to the tolerance that is expected, or you are not going to be there more than a couple of days.
Right. Right.
Not so with marketing people. You can pull the wool over an employer's eyes for years in marketing and get away with it. So you got too many people as marketers and not enough people in these highly skilled jobs. That's absolutely a big deal.
And one of the other things here, and I wonder how you two feel about this, but all three of us, have kind of over the years been in the gig economy. Some we've chosen to do that. You and I, Ron, or Ed,
Mm-hmm.
kind of moved into that environment by accident, but here we are. And so I think as somebody, I believe you pointed out, a lot of more new businesses have started over the past year than in a long, long time. So
Yeah,
a lot of these people, instead of going back to a quote job, are saying, I'm going to have my own job. But to your point, there's some things you can't do. I mean, like you can't, a plumber, yes, he can start his own business. I'm sorry about that. But, a CNC machinist, has no choice but to go into a factory where he can do his CNC machine work. So there are some interesting dynamics that I see happening that have caused some of the shift. And a lot of people are saying, hey, I want to have a job like Ron, Ray, and Ed do,
yeah,
where I can pick my choose and do my hours and make a
yeah.
decent living and etc.
Well, good luck with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a hard gig to do.
it is a
Yeah, it
hard.
sure is.
It is.
It sure
And a
is.
lot of people think it's a lot simpler than it is.
Right.
And there are lots of positions like that. On the other hand, there are also a lot of gig jobs that it's easy to get work if you happen to be, let's say, an engineer today.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's easy. In California, it's illegal just to kind of work for one or two people unless you have got a full-blown company in place. So there are pressures on both sides of that. Part of the reason people are leaving California, sort of middle income people, middle upper income people, are that they want to be a gig worker and they feel like they can't do it in California anymore because it's mostly illegal. Although it's extremely difficult to figure out what part is and what part isn't because certain industries have carved themselves out of the law. And so there you are. It's kind of a typical interference in small business. So
Well, another interesting point we really haven't talked about on this other side of this issue is everything that we do is costing more money.
yes,
Inflation is rapid. It's costing a lot to maintain a home, especially in California, as home prices have gone up 35–40% over the last few years. That requires most families in California to make it need to have two incomes. And if you don't have two incomes, you really can't buy a house, and you can't, you have to rent possibly, but even rents are extremely high. So California is an anomaly, if you ask me. It's different than most other parts of the country. There is, you have to make money here to live.
Yeah, you do. It's very, very costly. Gasoline is what, $1 higher than the rest of the nation. It just floors you when you go fill your tank.
Everything's higher here in California, no
yeah.
doubt about it, but especially housing.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
you may be right. I mean, when you think about better working conditions in the commute, that is a direct relationship, at least in California, in the cities, direct relationship to how expensive housing is. So you move out, which way out where we are in the Inland Empire, you move out to the Inland Empire from LA and Orange County in order to be able to afford to have a house. And then you're faced with commuting back in.
right.
Many others, including my son, because he can now work at home, literally moved from Orange County out here because he wanted to be close to the family, and because he managed to triple the square feet that he lives in for less money than he did in Orange County. So, that's a pretty heavy incentive. And then to be able to work at home every single day. I mean, he literally has never met his coworkers in person. So, I mean, there's that kind of economy as well. So people can make adjustments in an economy where you get to work at home occasionally. And part of those adjustments are finding cheaper places to live. So
Yeah.
that accounts for this mass exodus of California. Not only is there a mass exodus in California, there's a mass exodus of Orange County and LA out to us. I think we were the fastest growing
Right.
area in the country, tied with a place in Arizona. And that was mostly because of in-migration from adjacent counties, not because people are moving here.
Well,
So
and
there's
if I can, this is not a new phenomenon either. I moved out here in 1980, and basically when I was living in Milwaukee, my ex and I had bought a property, a fourplex for $90,000 in a beautiful subdivision. I came out here to California and I had to find a small house in the city of Orange. It was $90,000, and it just floored me. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So this has been going on as long as I can remember, and I'm sure it's going on before that. California has always been very expensive, and the sad part, and the truth of it is, people will pay it or have been able to pay it because they want to live here. So
Yeah. Yeah.
weird.
Well, there still is a lot of wonderful things about Southern California. But in terms of those wonderful things for businesses, you really, as a small business, you really have to think very clearly about the cost of your employees, the cost of everything in relationship to your market. And if you happen to have a geographic market that caters to Southern California, maybe that's okay and that works fine because that's where your niche is. But if you happen to be, say, a gig worker and you can do accounting or engineering or say finance from anywhere in the country, then the question really becomes, why in the world would you stay here unless you're already here and have taken advantage of the inflation over the years?
Right. And I think another thing that's a challenge for, as we look at this, why aren't people working? Part of the housing thing that both you and Ed have mentioned is, for our children, it's really, really difficult for them to be able to find the kind of opportunities that you and I had when we were younger.
Yeah.
I mean, there were jobs, you could pick a job anywhere and basically be trained in it. And today, you can't find a house. I mean, there are just lots of challenges that I think are contributing to this high rate of unemployment and people leaving the workforce.
Right. Ed.
Americans they use their ingenuity and they find ways to make up for deficiencies. And American businessmen and women are really good at that. So we are experiencing at this point in time a dramatic change in the way some businesses and most businesses are doing business.
Yeah.
So instead of going into a McDonald's, it's all, you're basically drive-through now.
Yeah.
It's changed that whole paradigm, which means it's going to change the demand for commercial space, because
Right.
just doing a drive-through, you don't need the space for people to come in.
Mm.
And I think you can make a case that just about every business is making significant investments on changing the way they do business so that they don't have to rely upon the low-skilled employees any longer.
Right.
Automation at this point in time, I think probably orders are up. That's causing part of the supply demand is that the orders are up because people want machines that are automated that can replace labor because they can't find people to do the jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. So let's go ahead. You kind of open the subject. Let's go ahead and talk about what do you do then to find and keep the old employees. What are some of the things that are happening? And that includes a very big thing, which is automation. Which thank you, Ed. You brought up another point that I'm going to have to add to these slides. Yeah, automation is one way to fix the problem. It's not really a way to attract new employees, but so here are some of the things that are happening. And number one, I think we all know wages are going up. We all know people who've had huge increases around here. It's not true for the entire country, but it is so at a little bit lower prices. Around here, we've gone from 12 to like $15 is sort of like the entry level. So that's $3 on $12. That's a pretty high percentage rate increase in a fairly short time, in like the last 18 months or 2 years. So wages are definitely increasing. Jobs are in higher end jobs. They're going up even much higher than that. And so we're seeing a whole lot of inflation as a result of wage increases because they have to increase it in order to get people to apply for the job. Of course, better benefits sort of follows along with wages, but some of the benefits are getting to be a little bit on the bizarre side. Not only are they upgrading health insurance, but they're adding dental and eye insurance and doing what they can in many other areas of insurance, like paying for life insurance, for instance, and disability insurance. So there are a lot of things that are, going up. I don't know this for sure. Maybe you could speak to it, Ed, but it seems to me like the percentage of benefits to the total wage package has gone up faster than the wages themselves. People are adding a lot of benefits. Is that true?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
People want better benefits, and they're going to go to places that provide them. And I think that brings up the disparity between big businesses that make higher margins, that can afford to pay these benefits, and then the smaller businessman and woman trying to inch out a living here by paying these benefits. Really hard for them to do so. It's hard to match. So that's an extra problem that small businesses have, competing with the big ones. And as we all know, the big ones do well whether Democrats or Republican administrations are in place. So from their perspective, it really doesn't matter. And they're trying to get the cream of the crop. They're trying to pay the best money because they have the highest margin.
Right. And it's interesting in this economy, there are record corporate profits this year, highest in decades. So, things are going well, but in that, the context of, finding and keeping good employees is really kind of an amazing challenge. In terms of benefits, do we ever think of soft benefits as well as, the hard ones that out of cost or out of pocket costs, for health insurance? I see companies that are saying, look, let's give free coffee, which may not seem like a big deal, but for some people that's important, and meals. And I think, as you pointed out here, the flexible working hours, Ron, is for a lot of women in particular, that means a whole bunch. So
Yeah, absolutely. And the flexible working hours, I think, kind of self-explanatory, but there are some other interesting things going on with nicer surroundings. I saw a video clip, and then I read about it in a separate article. This new business, I've forgotten the name of the building. It's in New York. It's taller than the Empire State Building, and they have actually put an entire floor in just for tenants to come and relax. There are restaurants, libraries, just very nice surroundings with a big deck overlooking the city, and that's all part of trying to make the workplace attractive to come. People are
Right.
putting in new lunchrooms. They're doing a variety of things in spending money in order to be able to make their workplaces nicer. So responding to that. And so if you're out there, even if you're a small business, you can put in a new desk. You can get some decent wall hangings or artwork. You can do quite a lot of things just to make it look nicer and make it feel better.
Right.
There are psychological benefits to that as well. You may find you'll get more productivity. It might even be worth bringing in a professional designer to be able to make things a little bit better for your location. Along with that, people are offering free lunch and free snacks. Um, I, a tiki bar sounds a little bit crazy, but one of my sons, the very first thing that he was introduced to in a new job was the tiki bar. You get free beer any time of the day and as much as you want to drink. Now, of course, there are limits to that because if you can't get your work done. But the idea was they want people to work 9, 10, 11, 12 hours a day and enjoy it as if they were at home. So things have changed in that particular industry, but that's what they did in order to attract a young male audience. Of
I
course,
think one of the biggest attractions for employees is work at home.
yes,
And with COVID, a lot of that was necessary, but I'm not sure it's going to go back to the way it used to be. I still think working from home is going to be a very attractive way and productive way of doing business.
yeah, I do too. And so a lot of small businesses are not set up to do that, and it's not hard to do. Um, my company has been work at home or work part time for 5 or 6 years now. And so that's worked out very well. You just have a drive on the cloud that everybody can access. You have somebody set that up for you. You use Zoom. It is not hard to do that if you're dealing in intangibles. The problem is if you're on a factory line and you're
Yeah.
building something, what do you do there?
Right.
So yeah, I think you're right to encourage small businesses to allow flexibility simply by allowing them to work at home. Now there are issues. You have timekeeping issues, and you got to have people check in and check out in certain states, and productivity. But all of the studies that I've read indicate that productivity is going up for honest workers. We had a conversation last week about honesty.
Right.
If you take that Orion and you eliminate those people who are not going to be honest, they're not going to steal time from you either.
Right.
So that's really key. Is you've got to have a good hiring situation to make sure you don't get some bad apples in there.
But just remember, 15 years ago, it was unheard of.
Yeah.
Nobody would sign off on it. It didn't make any sense. It wasn't going to work. Again, it's somewhat counterintuitive to the old thinking.
Yeah.
It does work.
It does work. It is
And-
counterintuitive.
And when you look at the freeways in Southern California, look at the productivity you gain by not having to take that drive to and
Yes.
from home.
Yes. My work at home all the time, son. It has the ad. He's a he's a very hard worker, and he would never work as many hours, an 8-hour day, anyway. Even when he was commuting into the city, But now that he's at work all the time, his rationale, which I found it was interesting, his rationale was, well, I'm not driving 3.5 or 4 hours a day.
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
certainly work an extra 2 hours.
Yeah,
So they're getting 10 hours a day out of him, a 25% increase in his work because he doesn't have to drive.
yeah, no, that's fascinating. There's another side of this in light of the hiring situation. And Ed, you kind of alluded to it. This movement toward home is affecting commercial real estate in very unanticipated ways, more in the big major cities than I think where we are, because if people don't have to go to work, why do I need this big space? Ed, you were talking about restaurants, but more deeply, why do we need all this office space when people are in fact at home? What kind of an impact is that having on hiring?
Well, I think working from home is a positive, and I think it's a positive for hiring people.
Yeah.
And but by the same token, I think a lot of people like balance and have certain days at home and certain days at the office is very productive. Social contact with customers and fellow employees is extremely important. I think the office space remains. I just think it's going to be used differently. And I think it's going to be used for collaboration, as Ron was indicating earlier. And you're going to want really nice space for people to feel comfortable in to increase their productivity, rather than maybe in the old days where we had like little dungeons that people would come into. They have a little workspace and they couldn't move around.
Right.
I think those days are over with. Again, this COVID is radically changing the way we are doing business.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
point.
Ed, it's funny to hear you say that, because the average person, I mean, we're even talking stockbrokers, making huge amounts of money. They come from a nice house, they get into their $40,000, $50,000, pod and drive to work, and they've got music, etc. And then they walk into this gorgeous, beautiful building, and then they go up to their floor and they sit down in a space that's 3.5 feet wide. How did employers get people to do that? I mean, to me, that's just like so completely ridiculous. But in fact, that's what has happened.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you're right, Ed. The workplace, and I'm not sure that people will abandon their spaces. As a matter of fact, the Wall Street Journal had an article 3 or 4 days ago about, no, they're not abandoning it. They're actually just revitalizing it in whole new ways. So they're opening, they're creating new spaces. They're letting people come back to work and get together. And another study indicated that the biggest thing that people miss that is actually causes some mental issues is not getting together with coworkers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so making sure that if you have a work at home environment, which sounds terrific, that you also have a come to work environment where you can serve a lunch, have a party, get together for these critical working sessions with your say your work group, have some company meetings, and then fill that day with spaces in between where the coworkers can get together themselves, where they begin to say things like, hey, on project X, we were doing such and such. I was thinking about this. That happens naturally.
Right.
That's what's so great about lunch. That's what's so great about Silicon Valley. That's what's so great about New York City. People get together in these ways, and they go to the bar afterwards, and if the workers are together, they don't just talk about non-work things. They include work. Many of them are actually making contacts while they're there. You have to have a way for people to make contacts, to talk about work, to talk about projects, to fix problems among themselves. So it's this new way of working that's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a radical change. And I think, as Ed, you pointed out, none of this would have happened if we hadn't had COVID that kind of accelerated this transition.
Right. So I know an organization, one that my wife runs, and we're all aware of the guy who has this office space for individual people, very small companies, and he has open spaces that you can just use, which are conference rooms with all of the accoutrements and so forth. That's another interesting format. This particular organization just has a small office for a worker, maybe two, but it also has a really nice conference room to use. So those kinds of real estate will accommodate very small companies that
Right.
need to have a place to get together and do things.
Right.
So another thing, signing bonuses, I guess that's pretty straightforward. People know what that is. But wow, excuse me, have they gotten crazy? My grandson, 19 years old, who's been making pretty good money with doing miscellaneous work and getting ready to go back to school, was telling me that he got offered a $3,000 bonus. Now here's a
Wow.
guy who's a high school graduate, and he got offered a signing bonus of $3,000.
Wow.
And I said, "Wow, that's a lot of money for you at this age." And I said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "No, that's not what I want to do. I'm not going to take it." Well, he's, I think wise. He wants to be a firefighter, and he's going to be going to firefighter school, and he's making good money, and he's living at home. I mean, he's living the life, right?
Right.
So really, why should he even take the signing bonus? It doesn't matter to him. That's an interesting issue.
Yeah.
Here's one of the weird ones I ran into: pet insurance. Something like 15% of all companies are offering pet insurance and finding that their employees like it, and it attracts people to work for them. Now, it's so popular that the forecast is that 27% of all companies will offer pet insurance in the future.
Wow.
Go figure that, huh?
Right. Whoever would have thought of that 15 years ago?
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. Yeah, I
And-
mean, now your pet
There are radical changes that are going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think one of the things that you're alluding to here, Ron, but is bringing your dog into work.
Well, that's right. Bring your dog to work. Make the next door neighbor suffer in your cubicle, and now we're going to ensure that your pet will continue. If one dies, you'll have another one to bring to work to make your cubicle guy miserable. And so, of course, a lot of people love pets. I can't imagine that they increase productivity in the office space. If everybody had a dog, you got to stop and say hello to the person and the dog now. That can't be productive. Discounts on legal and identity theft, etc. And I was thinking about this. That's a pretty attractive. If you could get an attorney for half price, or something happened to your identity and your employer helped you pay for it, that's a nice little benefit. Not tons of money, but something that is nice. I mentioned the tiki bar. And then one of the other things which has been around for a long time, but apparently more people are doing, is something simple. It's holiday-oriented giveaways. A turkey at Thanksgiving, a roast, maybe booze or something at Christmas. Well, maybe expanding that to 3 or 4 or 5 times a year, just to say thank you for working for us. So these are all things we haven't gotten the whole list here. There are other things, but I think the real issue here, in a case, the reason for this particular program is to say to especially smaller businesses, think outside the box. Take a realistic look at the costs. Take a look at what you think the benefits might be in order to increase wages and create better benefits. How much does it really cost to have a free taco day once a month? What's that cost versus what's the cost for, say, more benefits or an increased wages? Try to find out what it is that your particular kind of workers are interested in. What will attract the kinds of workers that you need? That goes back to understanding, your jobs, what they're doing, what they're supposed to be doing in those jobs, what their job description is, the kinds of personalities that fit those jobs best, which we'll be talking about in the future program. proper assessment, which we talked about in our last program, to get the right people to fit the right jobs. All of these things need to be thought about very creatively, but you can't just do things. I think we've all kind of reaffirmed that here today. You can't do things the same as you've done them in the past. What
Well,
closing statements do you guys have?
Yeah.
I think all these are important, but I really believe it comes down to a couple things. Number one, for me anyway, I want to work somewhere where I'm respected.
Mhm.
I want to be included. I want to be developed. I want to have opportunities to make more money. And I want to be part of the future of the company. And I don't want to go in and get hassled. I want it to be a professional environment where we all thrive and work together and collaborate as a team to improve the company and all the benefits for all the employees. That's what's important to me. In addition to these, you got to have decent benefits to be competitive, because somewhere down the road, you got to retire and you got to have enough money to do so. But I think a lot of times business owners fail to hit those marks. Sometimes business owners can be arrogant. They don't want to talk to their employees, or employees aren't really included in their operations. There's no path for the future, and they don't want to spend any money on developing them. Those places I don't want to work. That's just a different perspective.
Oh, those are all good additions, and of course, those are very important. Employees are looking for opportunities. Make sure that you're providing opportunities.
Yeah.
That's key.
And I think that little list you went through is very relevant, Ed. I think it's important, and the companies, that I've had the privilege of working for in my earlier life that treated us that way, obtained a tremendous amount more loyalty. And to me, as we know, the cost of replacing somebody can be extremely expensive. So if you have to have rehiring people, if you've got a turnover of 20%, all your profit is now going out the window. So those sorts of things are really critical. So thank you for bringing them up, Ed.
I think they're the building blocks of what you do, good-hearted leadership. And I think a lot of times people just fail to meet those marks. They don't think about them. And that's why it's really good to get you involved, because you connect the front line with the ownership, and that's extremely important.
Right. And I think what all of we're saying after kind of going through this is that corporate culture is still very important. We've mentioned that in previous programs, but many of these things fit into corporate culture. You have to have a place where, as Ed so beautifully said, where people feel comfortable, where they feel like they're included, they're being developed, they have some upward mobility within the company. Those are things that big employers do a pretty good job at, from my perspective, and small ones do an absolutely horrible job.
Yeah,
they do recognize a few key people and will move them along. Small companies are good at taking talented people who they recognize and allowing them to stay with the company and moving them along. But they're terrible at having a formal job, I'll say structure. I don't say it should be terribly structured, but a formal enough program to look at the talents of the people and match them with the requirements of the job.
yeah,
That is just wanting, in my view. I don't think I know of a serious program in a single client I've ever had in this respect, who were willing to do training. Of course, Ray, that's what we do. Who are willing to do extensive training with the express purpose of bringing every entry-level person up to their capability
right.
at a job in that company. And I'm talking about businesses in the 10, 15, 20, 30 million dollar range. They're still stink at that.
Yeah.
So if
I
you're in
agree.
that range, you could do something pretty different, and you could attract people by helping them find a career, literally,
Mhm.
that's going to last a lifetime instead of a job.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we'll close.
Well, and I think, yeah, if I can just wrap it up with one thought that I think is relevant to this whole conversation is that, you know, a business strategy is good, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. You know, if you don't have a good culture and you can't hire and keep people, you know, all this is moot. So yeah, thank you. I thought this was a very timely conversation. And, you know, hopefully if people are listening to this, they'll be able to see how they can make minor shifts that have major opportunities for them to grow their business and optimize their people. So thank you.
See you next time.
Bye.
Yeah.